Okay, Professor Jim Schultz here from my Finance 670 class. I wanted to go ahead and get into this stock valuation discussion, go over some stock valuation basics with you guys, and so let's go ahead and get started. As kind of has been the theme with the previous two discussions we had about time value, money, and bond valuation, there are a lot of intricacies and details and intuition and understanding that we're not going to go over in this class. Again, my purpose is to bring you guys up to speed on some basic mathematics. It is not to explain, the nuts and bolts. We're going to do all that in Finance 680. And so definitely remember the purpose here. The purpose is just to bring you up to speed on those basic mechanics. So stock valuation begins with this constant growth model. And this is the constant growth model right here, this guy right here. So here's what the constant growth model is, and here's what it's trying to accomplish. So the constant growth model is P sub 0 is equal to D1 divided by R minus G. Now, what is it trying to do? Well, it's trying to represent the stock price today. Again, as we kind of talked about in the previous two discussions, whenever you see a subscript 0 on something, that typically denotes today or right now. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to find a mathematical way to represent what is the stock worth today, or put another way, what should the stock price be today? The constant growth model basically has three inputs. The stock price today should be equal to the next period dividend, or the next dividend to be paid by the company, D sub 1, divided by the required return, R, minus the growth rate in those dividends. So dividends are pretty straightforward. They're just cash payments made by a company to its shareholders. The required return, that is basically you as an investor, right? When you invest in a company, there's going to be some interest rate that you are demanding on that investment. There's going to be some expectation of a return on that investment. That is your required return. The technical phrase for that in finance is your required return. And so when you guys start to work through some of your examples, you'll see that this number is, 8%, 7%, 10%, whatever it is. And again, in Finance 680, we'll talk all about how you arrive at that number. But for right now, all I want you guys to understand is, hey, I'm getting in, I'm buying stock in Chipotle, I'm buying stock in McDonald's, I'm buying stock in Apple. I have a required return on that investment. That's what this R is right here. Now G, this lowercase g, this is the growth rate, the expected growth rate in dividends. Now that growth rate is expected to be constant into the foreseeable future. So maybe the growth rate is 3% or 4% or 5%, whatever. What that number is telling you is the dividends are expected to grow annually by that amount. Okay? So that is what each variable in the equation means. And so when you start working out the problems, my hope is that you have a better understanding what you're trying to accomplish. The next thing I want to cover in this first part of probably a two-part series on stock valuation is this constant growth model works as long as the growth rate is constant. So if you have a problem where the growth rate is always constant, if you're looking for the stock price today, it's going to be equal to D1, or the next dividend, divided by R minus G. If you're looking for the stock price in 1 year, which would be P1, that's going to be equal to the dividend right after that period, which would be D2. So then P1 is equal to D2 divided by R minus G. If you're looking for P10, and I see that this is supposed to be a subscript, so hang on. There we go. If you're looking for P10 and growth is still constant, that's just equal to D11 divided by R minus G. So my hope here is that you guys can recognize the pattern. The current period stock price is always a function of the next period dividend divided by R minus G. So that's it for part one, and we'll pick up with dividends here in part two.